About a historic piece of land where a large neighborhood is proposed. It's an area called Fish Island, which is at the southeastern base of the 312 bridge in St. Augustine.
Jessica Clark found a relative of the colonial plantation owner who used to own that land. Here's the exclusive interview and his thoughts about the proposed development.
From the Matanzas River, Fish Island in St. Augustine is wooded and serene. In its heyday in the 1700s, it was a citrus plantation owned by a man named Jesse Fish.
He was fluent in Spanish and English.
Phil Eschbach says he has traced his family to Jesse Fish. Eschbach claims Jesse Fish's granddaughter,
Harriet Fish,
married one of Eschbach's great-grandfather's sons. And that great-grandfather, he says, is buried on Fish Island.
And he was a relative. I mean, his son married the daughter, so they buried him over there. And so Jesse Fish Jr. said, sure, come over here. You can be buried here with us.
Eschbach claims another relative is buried there too. The property is currently privately owned, and developer D.R. Horton is asking the city of St. Augustine for permission to build a neighborhood of 170 houses on the land. The developer says of the 72 acres, it will make a 2-acre park where the plantation house foundation still exists. But
of course, in Florida, it's illegal to mess with cemeteries.
Jesse Fish's own tomb was on the island, but archaeologists say it was vandalized and emptied decades ago. But is there another cemetery on the land?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. But I know 2 of them are buried there. I have records.
Archaeologists believe there could be other burials on the property, but they have not been located. We reached out to D.R. Horton, but we have not heard back. While many people are opposed to developing this land, which is on the National Registry of Historic Places, Eschbach is okay with the land being developed if
I would like to see that somebody is monitoring the development there in case a bulldozer hits something, that it's, hey, wait a minute, this might be one of the tombs.
But if he had his way, he'd like the whole area preserved.
The whole thing? Oh, yeah. It'd make a wonderful park.
For now, it's a quiet place in the middle of a development debate. In St. Augustine, Jessica Clark, First Coast News on your side.